I can see how that like kind of ties into things that we've spoken about before about control, and then it kind of links to something that was happening to me last night because a mosquito got into my room, and like I hate having mosquitoes around. They love me, I hate them, and it was biting me quite a lot. And I was stressing out because I was like, I put up all these mosquito nets in my apartment to prevent this from happening, you know? And I was getting myself really worked up about it. And then at some point I was like, there's nothing I can do about this, or like this is what's happening, like this, you know. And then there's this like acceptance of everything, and like this lovely feeling just like kind of consuming me. And then I just fell asleep, and then I was doing practical things because I got this little zapper thing that you can put on bites, like, and you kind of heat it up. And if you catch a bite early, it kind of doesn't even bother you. And then I fell asleep with that next to me. And in the night, I felt myself getting bitten, and I just reached for that thing and put it on the right place and then put it down, and I just fell asleep again. And it felt like this really lovely way of living where like I don't have to really worry about what life is doing. Even if it's doing things that I don't really like, I can just kind of respond to it. And that sounds quite similar to what you're talking about. But I think for you, like this is more like established as the way that you live, you know, most of the time. Whereas for me, I feel like it's something that I kind of dip into and then dip out of.
Yeah, I like that analogy. It's very, yeah, it's a small and concrete example, I think, of the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Yeah. So, practically the next day you might, check the mosquito nets to see if there maybe a hole in them, or if they're maybe, not hung properly or whatever. Right. I mean, there's some practical things to do to fix that, but you don't need a whole theory of, the cosmos in order to, address that situation in the moment. Right.
Yeah.
You don't need to have a whole sort of, my Enneagram and my astrological sign and, the Pleiadian, the Pleiadians and the alignment of the solar, whatever. Right. Yeah. I mean, you just don't need the theory.
That's totally how I think
with practicality.
What you just described.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of that sometimes, brings us up into the headspace. It brings us up into the, intellectual energies. And for some of us, I think for me, that is a safety, a move towards safety, right? If I can understand this, then if I can understand how this thing fits into a larger theory, then I can kind of like grasp it. And like you were saying, kind of control it by knowing, oh, this is a known quantity that I can make sense of. Then somehow that's controlling it. Somehow it's making it more safe for me. Yeah. And so, I still will sometimes do that with certain things that are extremely uncomfortable, to try to kind of make sense of it theoretically or intellectually. But I do feel like that's more the exception. That there is more just sort of a natural kind of responding in the moment to the situation without needing the larger understanding of the whole. Yeah.
It fits so well with things I've been reading for so long about like unknowing, like how unknowing has been so kind of emphasized by different mystical traditions, like that unknowing is somehow superior to knowing, and that is superior in the sense that is just a better way to live, like it's more comfortable, you're more kind of aligned with life, things flow more easily. Reminds me a lot actually of Eckhart Tolle, in the kind of way that he talks about things.
Yeah. I talk about this in the Awakening the Below in the book. That I think there's two kinds of mental exercise or mental kind of process that we can do. Because I think sometimes when people, so I agree with what you're saying about unknowing, but I think sometimes people translate that into, thinking is bad, just period, like full stop. Thinking is bad. We shouldn't ever think. And to me, that's a mistaken notion. That's kind of like, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like for me, the awakening of the below is really a celebration of all aspects of our humanity, all aspects of our organisms, capacities and skills and talents. And why would we take something as important and unique and really amazing that human beings can do and just bracket all of that off and say it's bad? Demonizing rational thought is like demonizing, I don't know,
athleticism,
emotions or something. Demonizing athleticism, demonizing emotions, demonizing, love, demonizing sadness. Like this doesn't make any sense. It's a natural capacity that we do. Now, some people do it better than others. Some people have more of it in their lives than others. Some people are more tangled up with it than others, just like all the other things that human beings can do. And sometimes it's helpful to kind of get yourself, untangled from something that you're very tangled up in. And that's just, of course, it would be the same if you were like very, very stuck on, I don't know, whatever, sexuality. Take a break for a while. If you're very hung up on, whatever, sensory pleasure, or you're very hung up on sleeping or a lot or whatever, you can kind of shake yourself out of a rut, and that can be helpful. But to demonize that thing is, I think, falling into an opposite extreme. So in the book, what I talk about is kind of two types of thinking, and rather than demonizing all thought, I think it might be helpful to just kind of like steer our thinking towards what I call associative thinking instead of towards like linear thinking. So linear thinking it's extremely useful if you're trying to solve a problem. If your toilet isn't working properly and you need to figure out how to you need to diagnose the problem, you need to figure out how to change the mechanism inside the toilet or whatever. You want this kind of linear thinking. First, I'm going to do step one, then step two, I'm going to figure out the problem and I'm going to solve it, right? Or if you're doing some kind of math problem, or if your work is in medicine, or I don't know, whatever, that kind of thinking is great. Doesn't necessarily work that well for navigating the below, though, right? So navigating the below, to me, associative thinking is better than linear. It's more effective than linear thinking. So linear thinking is, let's solve the problem, let's break it down into steps and figure it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Associative thinking is, let's use the power of the mind to unpack all of the resonances and the connections between this situation and all of the other possibilities. So it's more unstructured. It's not looking to solve a problem. It's looking to generate ideas, brainstorm, kind of, draw out connections, and not to just jump onto them and say, oh, that's the answer, but just to kind of like keep unpacking, keep unfolding. It's like a fractal, just keep unfolding the layer after layer after layer after layer of this particular thing. Right. So, like, just to use the example you were saying, and I'm not telling you how to think about your own situation, but just because it's the example on the table, I would say, I'm feeling kind of under the weather. it must be because of the solar flares. But that's linear thinking. That's like the kind that kind of collapses the possibilities, and it identifies one possibility and it narrows the scope, right? Whereas associative thinking would be like, oh, I'm feeling this way. And somebody's told me about solar flares. And somebody else, has told me about, I don't know what, the dietary, gut microbiome. And somebody else has told me about, I don't know what, collective movements in the collective, about, collective awakening, whatever. And somebody else has told me about, lack of sleep, and somebody else, and just on and on and on. There's like, 15 possibilities on the table that other people have said. And then maybe I do my own research and there's like even more possibilities, and it's ancestral and it's past lives and it's this, that, and the other. There's like all of these kinds of, possibilities that might be out there. And to be able to sort of like just hear all of those ideas and have them just pass through without necessarily needing to like intellectually collapse the possibility and like grab onto one of those and say, I have to make sense of this, and I have to pick one of these to make sense of it. Right. Like I have to control the situation by knowing what's happening. And so like, I need to pick one of these options in order to have a theory of this situation. Instead, just letting all of the possibilities just flow through without necessarily landing on them. And I feel like and then you just deal with the practicalities of the situation, but listening to all of the possibilities and just sort of holding them lightly and letting them run through you, there might be some good ideas in there. There might be some useful things that somebody says along the way that's like, oh yeah, that might be, I'll pluck that out and, try it on and see how that works. Right. Like, so, somebody says, well, try this, dietary change, or try sleeping more, or try, cocooning a little bit more, or try, resting more, or try staying indoors more, but whatever. There might be things in there that's like, yeah, I might give that a try and see. But I haven't adopted like this whole restrictive theory of the case, right? This whole worldview that now I'm going to like attach to and really sort of like, try to use to control the situation, just allowing things to flow through more freely.
Yeah. And I can see that in kind of what happened for me yesterday, in that it wasn't so much that I was in that moment, like I was attaching to kind of spiritual explanations for what was happening. It was more that my mind was spiraling about the negative possibilities, like predicting the future, basically, like being like, oh God, this is what happened last time, so this is what's going to happen again. I'm going to have a really horrible summer now because blah, 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 blah. And then being guided really, by a different aspect of myself, by a different being connected to myself, to look at the situation differently and be like, okay, well, no, and what I found was that there was like this area in my gut that was really tight. And like it was just saying absolutely no, like to this whole thing. And by just being with that for a bit, like it's like, it's almost like I was holding onto a rock and I let go of the rock. And the rock was that tightness inside my gut that was feeding the thoughts of this terrible thing is going to happen. And then by letting go of it, it felt like, oh, I'm free. Like I just feel wonderful. I don't really care that I've got these bites on me. And then the practical stuff was coming from that place.
Yeah. The practical stuff comes from a freedom of movement, unencumbered by these fixed points of view or theories or demands about how things need to be, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. So letting go of the fixed, the fixations on how things must be, or what this must mean, or what your larger picture this must be feeding into. Just letting go of all of that and just having that flow that you were talking about, right? You let go of the rock and you're just now. When you said that, I was imagining you're like in a river and you're holding onto the rock for dear life, but then because you think it's safer. You feel like you're safer holding onto the rock, but you're swallowing all this water, right? And if you just let go of the rock and then you're floating down the river, right? So that's the picture was in my head. So now you're just kind of floating down the river in a more fluid kind of way, and the situation can be resolved in a more natural, sort of spontaneous way that doesn't need all the theoretical kind of implications.
I really bob back and forth like that as well. Like I'll have these moments like that where it's like, oh, okay, like I can never win against life, like the life is going to be what it is. And I'm like happy going with the flow of life. I'm kind of with life. And then there's those other times where I just kind of like tighten it all up again. And that it is based around like sort of, it's like thinking that I know what life should be. Like I know better. Like, and my thoughts and my ideas and my conceptual kind of figuring everything out is going to be superior to whatever life could come up with.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of a conversation we had a few times back about I think at the time we were talking about a different example. I think it was about me and discovering how much of my own gripping was related to this early childhood. Sort of this little boy kind of gripping the steering wheel of life was the image that I was talking about, gripping the steering wheel of life, thinking that he needed to steer things, needed to control what was happening in order to be safe, in order to manage the situation, in order to understand the situation. And then just, at some point, just realizing through the awakening below and through a lot of work, but realizing that boy could let go of that steering wheel. And I think for me, that process was a little bit more, maybe sudden, a little bit more maybe intense, right? The letting go kind of experience happened quickly. And there was like kind of a big sort of letting go that happened all at once. We've talked about this before. I think your process is more gradual. I tend towards these kind of big, kind of flamboyant sort of shifts, and yours are more kind of, gradual. But we're talking about the same thing, just at a different scale, which is good because I think different people have different experience these shifts differently, and some people, are more quick and more slow, and not one's not better than the other. It's just differences of how people experience things. Just like some people go through puberty quicker than others, or some people grow, talk taller quicker than others, or whatever. It just, for whatever reason, you're not better or worse if you had your growth spurt, a clip earlier or later.
Sure.
It just is kind of like, for whatever reason, that's the way your body works. So yeah, there's no better or worse, but yeah.
We've spoken at length about this, but certain spiritual traditions do kind of make it sound like you are better or worse depending on when your growth spurt started, or like only a certain, it's only valid if it was when you were 13. It's not valid if it was when you were 17, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's really lovely that we're having this conversation actually, and it's helping me with something. And I think partly because, the way that I came into spirituality, it was quite sudden in the beginning. But the main figure there was Eckhart Tolle, who obviously is well known for having a very, very rapid, sudden awakening. And then I think because I was using him as my earliest model of what spiritual awakening looks like, it's kind of sort of warped my opinion of what my own awakening should look like.
Mhm.
You know, and because of that, I think I've missed certain things. Like I haven't, like when you were first describing your experiences, for example, and the releasing part of your awakening, like we've kind of been discussing other aspects of our awakenings for years up to that point. And there was a lot of overlap and we were kind of like in the same space. And then when you were describing that, I was like, oh, that's something different. I feel like you're now in this kind of different place and maybe I can't relate to that. And I was like creating all these stories of like, you know, maybe I'm not doing awakening right, like, you know, all the usual stuff. And I think it's probably good for people to hear me say this as well, because I'm usually the one who is talking and giving advice. And I think it's nice that there's flips and people can see that like I experience all this stuff too. Like that's why I'm able to talk about it. And I think that, but as time has gone on, you know, and we've spoken about this more, there's been these moments, like I messaged you the other day and I was like, hang on, are you talking about this? Like, and just like described something to you. I can't remember what it was now, but it was like, it was like being in such a state of surrender that you don't even have a concept of surrender anymore. Like it's kind of become so ordinary for you that you don't even relate to it like that. Like, and you're like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And I was like, oh, okay, right. Okay. Now I do have a sense of what you've been talking about all this time. And I've had glimpses of that along the way. But like you say, you know, for me, it's more of this gradual thing, whereas for you, it was quite quick and rapid.
Yeah. 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 And it's just part of the deal that people experience these shifts differently, right? And I mean, that's why there's so many different kinds of spiritual teachers and different kinds of messages that resonate for people at different times. Yeah, and your process seems to be like a big opening, maybe multiple big openings, but then sort of like a steady, gradual embodiment and sort of like sinking down into that. Mine was almost the opposite. I had years of very, very slow, very steady kind of opening. And then boom, lots of fireworks right at the end, with a lot of different kinds of shifts with a couple of years. So yeah, I mean, just little differences there, that make us unique and that don't necessarily mean anybody's better or worse than anyone else.
Exactly.
But yeah, the thing you said about the release, I do remember that recent kind of exchange that we had about that. And, yeah, I just wanted to say the surrender, the way you articulated it, I think is worth kind of maybe underlining. You know, the work in the below is about surrender. It's always about surrender. That's kind of the main point of my book. I think at one point I say, like, I've written this whole book, but if there's one thing you can take from the book, it's surrender. It's surrender. That's, you know, the bottom line. And your metaphor of, you know, gripping to the rock so that you don't get swept up down the river, right? The surrender is the moment of letting go, right? You're like, you surrender to the flow, you surrender to life, you surrender to what's happening. Surrender is the moment of letting go. So in order to surrender, you need to be gripping, right? Gripping is the opposite of surrender. Surrender is the opposite of gripping. You can't surrender if you're not gripping. So once you've let go of the rock, once you have surrendered at that point, like,
Yeah. You can't surrender again.
in the flow, you're just in the flow, right? Um, so to surrender would be to re-grip onto something and then surrender again, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think what you said is, are you talking about being so surrendered that you don't even think about surrendering, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you surrender over and over and over and over again until it's just like, oh, I don't need to grip in the first place, right?
Yeah. And like, about gripping or letting go. Like you're not even thinking about either.
That's right. At that point, the whole thing becomes a non-issue, right? Surrender or not surrender doesn't matter anymore because both of them are irrelevant. Both of them are states or temporary like gestures or movements that you're no longer needing to make.
I think it's so interesting, like the way that you and I have come together and formed this connection. And as you say, like in a way, your trajectory has been the opposite of what mine has been, in that mine was rapid at the beginning and then was slowed down, and yours was slow. Has come quickly. And I feel like by talking and comparing our different perspectives, like, because there's something to be gained by moving through something slowly. Like, you have a different perspective than when you move through it quickly. Not about better or worse, it just is different. So you get a clearer picture when you understand both. And because both of us have experienced fast and slow, but at the opposite time, it means like by comparing notes, we can get a clearer picture, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was just thinking of, I had a little road trip with my wife this weekend, and, when one person's driving, the other one is looking out the window and seeing the scenery, right? So if I drove halfway and then my wife and I switched and she drove the rest of the way, right? She would have a much better memory of what the scenery looked like in the first half of the trip. And I would have a much better, memory in the second half of the trip. And then we could go compare notes. Oh, did you see that? No, I wasn't. I was kind of out of the corner of my eye because I was focused on, the road. But tell me more about it, right? And then we could share, and both kind of enjoy each other's, difference in perspective. We were on the same ride, but we saw different things, right?
Yeah. And the same with the driving too. Like the person looking out enjoying the scenery doesn't know the experience of the journey. Like, so might find it more difficult to navigate if they were needing to drive as well. Yeah. Cool.
I'm always making silly metaphors, so that it just happens spontaneously somehow. But
I say,
popped in my head.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. And, this conversation is giving me this sense of just like the total okayness of everything. And I think because like I was talking to you about, like, I've not been feeling that great. I don't know. It just kind of like churned up some old stuff in me. And I've been feeling kind of stuck in that for like the second half of today, just kind of sludgy. But through us talking about this, it's just kind of reminded me that everything's fine, basically. It's all okay, and I don't need to stress about it, because as cliche as it is, like what will be, and I can just go along with it.
Yeah, and just to bring it back full circle, like, it's not, oh, you can surrender to this because you understand that it's caused by solar flares and therefore blah, 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 right? It's not surrender because I could surrender if only I knew what it all meant, or I could surrender if only I had a theory of the case, or I could surrender if only my mind was settled about this or something like that. Right.
Mm.
Right. It's surrendering the need to have the framing, the need to have the theory, and also
Yeah.
surrender. Yeah.
And I think that's what you're talking about when you're saying about the end of spirituality, right? Because you've said before, like, spirituality is finished. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I think at a certain point, all of the frameworks, all of the models and understandings that we have, that we've used to make sense of things, also can be surrendered.
Yeah. So you're saying
they are also rocks. There are also rocks that we're gripping to.
Right. Like Ramana Maharshi, when he talks about spiritual practices are thorns to remove thorns. Or so when you're saying spirituality is finished, you're saying like the need to grip and conceptualize through spirituality is finished.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, it's so funny, like how I can kind of warp my own experience of like, so Fran, and for those of you who don't know, Fran was my teacher for like 5 years. Fran, where was I going with that? She used to say like there's kind of like two types of spiritual seeker. There's people who massively overestimate their state of awakening. There's people who massively underestimate their state of awakening. And obviously we can move back and forth between those things, but I think it was a nice description. And I certainly have been someone who moves back and forth between those two things. But I do have a tendency of like being in this kind of underestimating side of things. So if somebody is describing some kind of like spiritual experience that they're having or whatever, or, realization or whatever it may be, I am more likely to assume that that is not happening to me. But when we've been talking about things, I can like look at my own experience and I can see how I relate to what you're saying. It's just it takes me ages, basically, because we've been talking about this for a long time. But I can, because just in an average conversation with people, like if I'm talking to a friend and like they're kind of coming into spirituality, and they're kind of all excited about it and stuff, and like they wanted to talk about it, I just don't really have that desire so much. And it's like, I don't feel like I need spirituality. I've kind of, my mind has come to a different place. Like that's not what I'm focusing on, And in a way, it feels like I'm shifting into this kind of post-spiritual thing, which I've been doing for a while, like at least a year or two. But really gradual. So gradual that when you were describing what you're experiencing, I didn't think I could relate to it. It's bizarre. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a feature of your own conditioning, right? Your own personal conditioning.
Exactly.
Because of childhood, because of this, that, or the other, it leaves you with the habit of doubting yourself in comparison to somebody else.
Yeah.
Or leaves you, with this sense of I'm not enough somehow.
Exactly.
Right. I'm not worthy. If I couldn't possibly have had those kinds of realizations myself, or something.
Yeah.
And
it's been like that for me, like all the way through my awakening. Like I remember for at least the first year, I didn't even think of myself as having a spiritual awakening. I wouldn't even go there. And it was like maybe a year or two in that someone that I was talking to who was a scholar researching spiritual awakening. And I just had this little conversation with them and I mentioned a couple of things that happened to me. And they replied saying like, oh, well, thank you for sharing your experiences of spiritual awakening. And that was like the first moment where I actually was like, oh, is this, that's happening to me? You know?
Yeah.
And then I see people going the total opposite way, where the moment one little thing happens, they're like, I'm fully enlightened. I'm teaching
Well, I'm the
courses
Buddha.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Which is their
And I had
conditioning,
moments
right?
like that.
Which is this is their conditioning, right? Because of childhood, because of past, but because of past lives or ancestry or whatever, culture, etc. They're built in that way, right? And it may be helpful. So just to piggyback on what we were talking about earlier, it might not be so necessary to go down into the explanation of where that conditioning comes from and have a whole theory of that conditioning. Like, for you could go into a whole sort of investigation of, how does the psychology of trauma work, and why do I have this particular, configuration of conditioning, and what's like, you could read academic papers about it and have a whole theory of it, right? And it just wouldn't change anything. It's just would just be a model or a theory or a worldview, a view of the case that you will have established for yourself. Or you can just kind of understand this conditioning, think more associatively. So there's all kinds of different reasons why this might be the case. I don't have to pick any of them. Sure, it could be trauma. It could be my Enneagram. It could be my, past lives. It could be my ancestry. It could be my genetics. It could be my blah, 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 all sorts of different reasons that it could be. I have to pick any of them, but maybe there's some skillful kind of approaches that I could gather up from some of those different perspectives. If it was trauma, then I might, get some insights about this or that. Or if it is my Enneagram, then I could get some insights about this or that. And if it is my, notion of, I don't know what you could just kind of like, gather up some useful approaches without needing to have a whole theory of it. And then just, it's situational in the moment. Oh, right now I'm feeling this familiar vulnerability, this familiar unworthiness coming up, and in this moment, right, I can sort of deal with it on a practical basis without needing a whole theory about it.
Yeah, like the place, and I think we've gone through a similar process with this. Like for me, with like all the kind of depth psychology stuff and like that, so investigating the psyche specifically in that kind of childhood and everything. Like I went really deeply into that for maybe about 8 years, somewhere between 6 and 8 years, I think, where that was like my primary focus, like figuring that stuff out, reading books on it, working with it, having counseling and all these kind of therapies and everything. And I can't remember exactly how, but at some point along the way, I just stopped needing to do that. And it wasn't to say like I'm somehow done and finished and my psyche is now perfectly healthy or something. But it was just like the kind of motivation or the need to go into it just started kind of falling off. And I think it's similar for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking now, about this kind of like not getting stuck into theories and frameworks and so forth, but I spent a lot of time, just like you, sounds like you too, a lot of time investigating and learning and believing different kinds of frameworks and really thinking like, oh, this is it, this is the real deal.
Well, but I guess what's on my mind is probably a continuation of that. And I just want to mention it because people have all these ideas about spiritual awakening, like especially what you might call late stage spiritual awakening, like as if you become something that is just like inhuman, you know, like you've sort of transcended everything. You never have negative emotions. You never have problems. You never have, this or that. Everybody likes you. I don't know. Everybody's got their ideas about what that stuff looks like, right? And I think a lot of it is mistaken, and some of it's true. But like, I think it's good for us to talk about this kind of stuff because it helps to kind of normalize things. And a big thing for me, which is like what I see as part of my role as kind of continuing Fran's legacy, like, because she was always just super down to earth. Like, she could have presented herself as being this, like, almost inhuman spiritual figure and had the experiences to back it up, which probably would have sold very well in the spiritual scene. And, I look around and I do see people doing that kind of thing and, doing well from it. But for me, I don't feel like a lot of that stuff is real. And so I try and kind of highlight my humanity, my vulnerabilities, all of that stuff. So it's nice talking about this in this way. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but just I'm glad that we're like highlighting issues that we have, and that hasn't gone away. It's like, yeah, okay, there's still problems. Like I remember you talking about when you had that really big kind of releasing experience, and then you had a problem with your was it your shoulder or your arm, like, and you needed to get medical attention.
Yeah, I mean, I've had plenty of problems since since this big releasing experience. All kinds of stuff with family stuff, work stuff, physical stuff. I mean, all kinds of things like that, and I think the kind of the transcendent ideal that you were just referring to, this fantasy of the above style traditions, above style awakening, this fantasy that we're going to transcend our humanity, transcend our human bodies, transcend the human condition, and become these perfected beings. I mean, I think it's an inspirational and potentially helpful goal or ideal to have in mind.
Yeah.
It certainly serves a lot of people really well to orient towards, the wisdom of the above, to practice in that direction. To have awakening experiences and come out of the kind of the muck and the suffering and the evil of ego-driven life, right? To reorient towards figures like the Buddha or Jesus or Ramana Maharshi or whoever. It's certainly really helpful in many, many ways. But at a certain point, those ideals, if they become fixations, or if they become standards by which you're measuring yourself and other people, these mythological beings are now the standards by which you are
pretty harsh
measuring other people. It's difficult, right? Yeah, it's only going to create difficulties for yourself and others. So the below, the direction is different altogether. We're not even aiming towards becoming Buddhas or Jesus or Ramana Maharshi. In the below, I think we're aiming at becoming fully human, not transcending humanity, but actually embodying the full spectrum of humanity, of our humanity, of who we are, embodying the full spectrum of every last shred of our own humanness.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. And just really being it, really allowing it to come forward, really celebrating it, really immersing in it, and not rejecting any piece of our humanity, not pushing away, not seeing through, not transcending, not leaving behind, but actually fully accepting, fully loving, fully surrendering to every last shred of our humanity. It's just a different project.
For sure. Like, I relate to that so much. Like, for a while, the kind of standard or the goal that I've been aiming towards is kind of just being human, which basically I just mean being myself as fully and authentically as possible. And that's really been coming up for these past couple of weeks. You know, I've spoken to you about my dad being in this Netflix documentary because he was a criminal defense lawyer and by chance represented one of Britain's worst ever criminals. And watching the documentary, I'm like, it's sort of like opened up some of the ugliest dimensions of humanity. And I was watching that documentary and then I just felt like I needed to watch true crime stuff. I've just been watching loads and loads of true crime stuff on YouTube. Like I'll watch it again tonight. I know it. Like, and it's just like something in me just needs to look at that, you know? And,
Yeah.
And I think it's like, we get the desire to fully meet humanity.
Yeah. 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 And for you, there may be some ancestral, through your father, some kind of rationale or reason or drive to sort of understand him, to understand, or to connect with him somehow through that. There may be all kinds of reasons why, maybe, who knows, past lives, right? Enneagram, solar flares. It's any number of reasons why.
All my go-tos.
why that might be rising to the fore right now. Does it, it can be explored, can be thought about, can be, associations can be found. The more associations you make, the richer the experience can be, right? There's some, it becomes more and more meaningful if you have more associations packed into it. In some ways that can be really, really helpful and useful. But yeah, at the end of the day, this experience of being a human being, right? And encountering kind of the most horrific possible manifestations of humanity. Not that we have to commit those kinds of acts ourselves. That's not at all what I'm saying. But we look at what it means to be human, and we don't turn away from it. We don't deny within ourselves the range of emotions, the range of possibilities that make us human, right? We don't need to become serial killers ourselves, but we understand that it's in there. It's in the human. That evil is here. That sadness is here. That that grief and pain and loss and suffering, that all of these here are part of the human experience. Doesn't mean we have to enjoy those kinds of experiences. We don't need to turn them into some kind of like love and light kind of situation. But we also aren't trying to escape them, deny them, and transcend them. So we just look at them and sit with them, accept them, surrender to them.
Exactly. That's surrendering, because I feel like that rock and river analogy that we've been using can be applied to this, and that the love and light stuff could be the rock that you're clinging onto, or just denial, or just like not looking at it. Like can be the rock that you're clinging onto. And like, I feel that as like a grip inside of me somewhere. And then it's like, well, can I even meet this? Can I even meet these worst, some of the most terrible things? And I think in a sense, it creates like this real sense of freedom when you're able to do that. It's like, I don't have to run away from the reality of human life. And that these really bad things are a part of the reality of human life, and not all of it, but they're a part of it. And my mum is someone who's always kind of like turned a blind eye to things. And I've kind of like observed her so much and witnessed it in a lot of other people as well, like this kind of compulsive need to turn away and to create a story that's kind of a kind of a fabrication of positivity.
Yeah.
So we don't, and that's a kind of prison in and of itself,
Yeah. Yeah. And like we mentioned earlier, I think that's what a lot of people are doing with spirituality, right? They're creating this sort of shell of safety and denial. And so we talked earlier about sort of letting go of spirituality as well, letting go of those frameworks that we cling to protect us from just life itself, the unpredictability, the blood and guts of it. It's both dark and light. For every shred of love and light, there's evil and darkness too.
Yeah.
And we can't have it one way, and only one way.
Yeah. And that was something that was coming up for me while I was doing all this. Like that kind of void space that we've spoken about before, like opened up. And I felt this very kind of, very accepting feeling. If I was going to put it into words, it would be something like, I started to really realize that I could like rest my feet on the darkness of the world.
Mm.
Like, because I think a lot of people, they'll try to, they'll trust the light, like the light's got my back, the light's going to take care of me. It's like, well, that's not the whole picture though. Like, what about the darkness? Like, can you have as much faith in that? Because if you're going to have faith in life itself, you have to have faith in both of those things, not just one of them. So can you kind of allow your ground, trust the ground of the darkness?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That brings us back to grounding that we talked about earlier. Yeah, and the strength of grounding in the full spectrum, right? I mean, if your grounding is relying on having there be pleasant, positive sensations and feelings, what kind of grounding is that?
Yeah.
Right? What kind of illusion? Yeah. What kind of illusion of grounding is that?
Yeah.
Can you sink your feet down into the mud when the mud is pain, suffering,
Yeah.
unpleasantness, and you sink your feet down into the mud when the mud is not pleasant. Yeah, that's true grounding, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true because it, it's got this kind of supreme neutrality to it. Like, so it's true because it will, that, that way of being can apply itself to anything. Whereas the other way is like, it can only apply itself to half the situation. And this is hard to explain to people, like I've been kind of banging this drum for a while. And obviously what I'm describing is a kind of evolution of it just getting deeper and deeper. I've been banging this drum for a long time. And sometimes the comments like, I get are like, people don't want to go in that direction. They really want the illusion to be true. The kind of the love and light illusion is true, and it is hard for people who've invested in that to let it go.
Yeah. I mean, that's why these traditions have, literally billions of followers and, in the spiritual world, there's like, 99.9% of people are aligned with these, transcendent traditions, and not too many people are talking about the kind of stuff that you're talking about, or that we're talking about here. I wanted to jump on one word that you said, and I just to make sure that people didn't hear it the wrong way, because you said it's like a supreme neutrality. And I'm going to speak for you because I think I know what you meant, but please tell me.
Probably. I expect you to.
But I don't think you meant by that. What you meant by that is that this grounding can be done in any circumstance, regardless of the circumstance. But the grounding is not done by applying a filter of being neutral or being equanimous with whatever's happening right now. Yep. Right. So it's not about applying neutrality to the situation. No. Because if we're doing that, we're just transcending, right? If we're sitting in the muck, if we're sitting in the pain and we are looking to be neutral about the pain, then we're actually not there. We're actually not embodying it. We're not doing what you and I are talking about right now. So what we're talking about is being with, sitting with, fully allowing it to be there, fully allowing the dark to be there, to be as it is, to accept it, to surrender to it. No matter what form of it comes up, that too can be surrendered to. That too can be welcomed. That too can be here. Yeah,
exactly.
I know what you meant, but I wanted to make sure.
I knew you knew. When you said that, I was like, oh, you got something about attachment. And it reminds me actually of another thing that's misunderstood. Like when people talk about the middle way in Buddhism, I think they're probably the same kind of misunderstanding. And I don't think the Buddha was talking about that kind of total neutrality either. Like I think he was talking about something all encompassing. So like the middle not being the middle between two polarities, but rather than that you like all polarities.
Yeah. Who knows what the Buddha meant, but yeah, the middle way is like, certainly we shouldn't be aiming for like the average, right? The middle of the road, like kind of average, right? I think what we're talking about here is it's going into the dark, going into the light, both, whatever's manifesting, whatever's here, both can be part of the whole, both can be surrendered to, both can be welcomed. Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, I feel like this has been another wonderful conversation.
And, I'm loving these. There's a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. And I'm seeing from the comments that people are getting a lot out of it, and I'm glad. I don't think these topics are spoken about enough. And I'm glad that both of us are in a place where we're kind of grounded and ordinary and human enough that we can talk about it in such like a normal way as well. Like, it's not like it's easy to, go into topics, the kinds of things that we talk about, and make it very, what's the right word? Kind of, I guess, inaccessible or grandiose. And I'm glad that we can make it
esoteric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you. I feel much better. Me personally, I was feeling kind of crap coming into this conversation, and I feel a lot more uplifted now. So thank you so much.
Don't judge our conversations based on how much love and light you feel after them, though.